What are the top 5 complaints from musicians about using a loop pedal?
Here are 5 common complaints musicians often have about using a loop pedal. 1. Complexity. Loop pedals can be complicated to set up and operate, especially for beginners. 2. Timing issues. Achieving perfect synchronization between loops can be challenging, leading to timing errors. 3. Limited flexibility. Some musicians feel constrained by the loop pedal's features and limitations, affecting their creativity. 4. Sound quality. There can be a noticeable drop in sound quality when layering multiple loops. 5. Portability. Some loop pedals are bulky and not very portable, making them less convenient for live performances.
That is the top 5 complaints coming from GPT, and on Gemini, which is Google, then it is timing issues, difficulty with clean loops, limited functionality, potential for signal degradation, and also user interface challenges. So very, very similar. I've been wondering whether to actually get this video out, and I've had it in my sort of video ideas box for actually weeks, if not months. And please don't hate me when I give you a couple of answers. We're going to go through each one of these 5 and I'm going to address them directly. But for me, there's only 3 reasons, and 2 of them are you. You're the problem. And please don't unsubscribe and think I'm some kind of Simon Cowell when I say that. But the 3 reasons that people have real issues with them, 2 of them are user error. The only other issue, which isn't user error in my opinion, is maybe a fault or a genuine lack of features from a loop pedal which was expected. But the other 2 actually play into these top 5 that are here. I'm going to go through them one by one. The first one, complexity.
Loop pedals can be complicated to set up and operate, especially for beginners.
This is true if you are a complete beginner and you go and buy something like an RC600, a Sheeran Looper X, a 505 Mark II. You have to treat them like an instrument. You're learning a new instrument. First of all, you've got to learn looping, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the second part of it is you've got to know where everything is. Now, things like the Sheeran Looper X, which has a touchscreen, it's very easy for navigation, but there's still loads in there. But the RC600 or the 505 Mark II has that tiny display and loads of menus to dive into. Even the RC500 can be confusing if you don't know what you're doing. Then there's the actual issue of setting up. What people don't understand is you've got your inputs and your outputs to your guitar going in and then your guitar going back out again, but then you've got the loops as well. And that's just guitar. If you've then got one that's got vocals, you've got to think of 2 channels going in, then going back out, and then on top of that, you've got the loops. Think of the loops like a separate instrument. So they're coming out of that machine, whether it's a tabletop looper, an app, or even a pedal, then you've got to think about routing. When I talk about complexity and setup and operate, this is where it comes down to you. This bleeds over to number 2, which is timing.
Achieving perfect synchronization between loops can be challenging, leading to timing errors.
You could be playing guitar for 20, 30, even more years and be amazing at guitar. You're also amazing at syncopation with a guitar. But can you do that while also pressing a pedal exactly on time? Yes, you can press a distortion pedal and that's fine. Or yes, you can press a chorus pedal and that's fine. But can you do it in time, bang on, right from the very beginning? It is a skill, and it's a skill you need to learn. I have a course which is called How to Loop Like a Pro. It's only £48 if you want to go and check it out. In fact, it's underneath the video right here, right next door to the t-shirt and the hoodie called How Do You Loop. In that course, we go through the most fundamental thing, which is timing. Timing, timing, and timing again, because if you don't get timing right with the syncopation of your hands and your feet, or your hands and your hand for tapping something, if you're playing and singing, or whatever you're doing, you're not going to get the first loop right, and therefore all the subsequent loops are going to sound off. Now, I don't want to come across as some kind of teacher who's just battering you around the head saying timing, timing all the way through, but I kind of am, because without this, you're not going to get this right. That pedal you bought with all that hope and joy and that anticipation of becoming a loop artist or using a loop pedal goes in the bin. So for someone who's been looping closer to 20 years, please heed what I say. Get your timing right. Practice, slow down, and make sure you can walk before you run with looping. The next one, limited flexibility.
Some musicians feel constrained by the loop pedal's features and limitations, affecting their creativity.
The reason for this is because you've made a bad choice with the loop pedal. You've thought, I'm going to get a looper, but then you don't have the budget for it, so you buy a crap one. You buy a cheap, really cheap pedal with one button. You've got to do double taps to stop. It's got limited functionality. It doesn't save any memories. It doesn't have a rhythm section, or it doesn't even have synchronization built into it to help you get good at looping. Last month, I was at the Guitar and Bass show in Birmingham, and I ran into the lovely Andy Ferris, who is the guitar geek, and he gave some amazing advice about buying your first loop pedal. What would you suggest as a looper for just going, I've never done it before, buying a looper as a guitarist, for example?
This might be, a hot take.
Go on.
But I think that those one knob, one stomp loopers should be avoided at all costs.
Okay.
Because of the double stomp tap. I understand from a financial point of view, you can get loopers crazy cheap now. I feel like 30 quid, 40 quid?
30, 40, 50 quid, yeah.
But I think the frustration they can cause,
double
like,
tap
bum, bum,
while you're doing,
you're still, and if you're new to looping, it's like suddenly having to play guitar with your foot. You're not just changing channels or anything. You're doing something has to be so specific in the timing that I think it's worth spending more money on at least something with two switches.
Okay.
And you can get stuff that is not that, like maybe 60 quid or 50 quid.
Now, I really haven't thought about this beforehand because I've learnt my chops, I've learnt how to loop, and then I've kind of gone backwards and played with a really basic pedal. In fact, I've done a video about a really simple one pedal looper, a cheap one. But actually thinking about it now, I agree with Andy, and if it was me and I was going to get a loop pedal right from the very beginning, I would get one where you've got a dedicated stop button. Or if it is a one pedal looper that you can add a foot switch on, so you've got a dedicated stop pedal. I don't like the double tap to stop, and then there's other pedals that have a one pedal looper and then they've got a drum machine, but then you've got to still double tap to stop, and then you've got to stop the drum machine. Pedals like the Donald Circle looper actually can split it. So, for example, the foot pedal can be the dedicated stop for the looper, or you can have it as the start and stop for the rhythm section. You're about to get a JP rant, and this isn't at you, this is at companies. Companies who throw a really basic looper on top of another product, aka you get an amp, and inside that amp there's a looper built in with a chorus and a delay, and you plug an external foot switch in so you can control the looper, but it doesn't have an undo or a redo. It's double tap to stop. Those kind of loopers, the ones that are added on as an extra feature from the thing that you're really buying, I'm not a fan of them unless they have specific things. As well as record, play and overdub, they must have undo and redo. They must have an option to have two pedals with a dedicated stop and a dedicated clear. Without having those features, those limitations can make or break you as a loop artist. In fact, you won't even get to be a loop artist because you'll just go, nah, I can't be bothered with this. Looping's not for me. When actually, you haven't tried it on a dedicated, proper loop pedal. So all these companies that throw in basic, really basic loopers onto the end of an effects processor or into an amp, please update them, or please get better versions of loop pedals. We deserve better. Okay, rant over now. I'm going to stop and we'll get on to number 4. Now, before we get over to items 4 and 5 on the list, I'm guessing you're a musician, and I'm guessing that you're maybe making some music. You want to put that music out there. That's where today's sponsor comes in, which is DistroKid. DistroKid is a music distribution company. It's the #1 independent platform for musicians. So if you've got music you want to get out there in the world and you want to put it on Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or Tidal or Deezer, iHeartRadio and loads others, or you want to put it on social media so people can use it in their reels, then DistroKid can help you. Most music distributors charge you every time you release some music, but DistroKid have never done this, and they've always done it as a subscription, and it's an annual subscription. But don't worry, it's not something like 50 quid a month or anything. It's $22.99 a year, and we can make it 7% cheaper than that with the link that's in the description box. Now, there's a couple of different tiers. I'm on the Musicians Plus one, which gives you 2 artists. So there's me as John Paul and me and my mate Greg at Tokyo Wasteland. There's even a label tier if you want to go up to that one as well. But the reason we're on the Musician Plus one, apart from the 2 artist bit, is you can schedule the date of the release. There's loads more like promo cards and hyperfollow pages, which helps you release your music. And because your music will be on social media like Meta, Instagram, TikTok, even Snapchat, then you can start pushing your music in reels and stories, and you get paid for it. Hey, if it goes viral on social media and everyone starts using your music for their stories, Good job. So thank you very much to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. There's a link in the description box. It's also the one that's just come up on the screen there. That'll give you 7% off no matter which tier you choose. Go and release some music for 2025 and beyond. Number 4, sound quality.
There can be a noticeable drop in sound quality when layering multiple loops.
Now this one feels a bit dated to me because the sound quality of loopers has been improved all the time. Now in the good old days with the Akai Headrush E2, that was true because it's actually a tape delay, and as you added more layers on, it reduced the amount of quality because it would reduce the volume as you add more things on. But again, going back to the really cheap loopers, and I mean really cheap, then they'll have decay or they'll have volume decay. So as you add more layers on, it just gets quieter from the very first loop. Some people get the order of where your loop pedal should be completely wrong. And I did a video all about where it should be on your pedal board, but also if you're plugging into an amp. The number one thing for a loop pedal and an amp is the amp needs to have an effects send and return. That way it can send out the sound, the effect signal, out to the looper and back again. And then when you change your effect on the amp, maybe there's a crunch or a distortion, whatever, then the looper doesn't change its entire sound. Additionally to sound quality is also down to routing, and going back to our first problem about setup. The last one, portability.
Some loop pedals are bulky and not very portable, making them less convenient for live performances.
I like to argue this one because there's some amazing loopers, and some of the amazing loopers are the bigger loopers, like the RC600, the 505 Mark II, the Sheeran Looper X, and many others. The reason for some of the big loopers, of course, is more loops or more channels, or more things going on, like the Sheeran Looper X has these amazing pedals, but it's got a big 7-inch touchscreen. But it's heavy and it's bulky. The Boss RC600 loop station is half the size of the Sheeran Looper X, and that's still quite big because it has multiple ins, multiple outs, it's got 9 switches on board, and it can do loads of different things. Things like the Circular Sound Aeros looper can loop loads, but it's much smaller, but then there's a limitation of how many buttons you've got. And if your looper is again built into like an effects processor, you're going to be taking that with you anyway. When you're getting to a loop pedal of that size, you have to make a decision. And the decision is, are you a loop artist? At this point, you're using that many loops, you are playing around with loops and you're dedicated to that device. People who complain about the size of the loop pedal really only want to throw 1 or 2 things down, but you still want to do it well. So maybe you want it to be part of your pedal board. Hence why a single button looper. But again, we've talked about that and the problems that it comes with. Now, if you want to take looping to the next level and you want to learn about looping, maybe you're on the cusp of it, or maybe you've bought a looper, you've had it since Christmas, it's gone in the drawer and it hasn't really been used. Well, it's time to crack that open because I've got a course that teaches you how to loop, whether you're using a foot pedal, a tabletop looper, or even an app like Loopy HD or Loopy Pro. Now that course was normally £199 and I'm now selling it for just £48. The link for that, as I said, is underneath. Go and check it out. Now the advantages of looping, over half of this channel is dedicated to looping. So if you haven't seen my channel before, hi, go around the channel, have a look, and if you like a couple of videos, give this one a thumbs up. That helps me, it helps the channel grow, but then also maybe you've seen a couple of my videos, consider subscribing. Over 85% of people who watch my videos are not subscribed. I've got a huge goal this year to get to 50,000 subscribers, which is ginormous, and we're already in March and we're just on 31,000. So I'd really like your help. Give it a thumbs up, give it a subscribe, and let's get this channel elevated so more people who are considering looping can watch this video.